Mass Effect is kind of a huge game. Pretty much everything about that game's huge. The size, the scale, the sales, the budget, the ladies. So if you're trying to do a game like Mass Effect, size is a good place to start. It's got to be big in all the same areas. All the same areas. Might need some alien implants, is what I'm saying.
Oh, really?
You know, Mars War Logs actually gets off to a good start. It has the setting, the backstory, and it certainly has an impact. We start by meeting Innocence, a young man torn from his family and forced into war. And as he rides in a truck, transporting captive soldiers like cattle, he gives a surprisingly vivid description of life in the trenches. It turns out war is hell no matter what planet you're on.
Up close, war doesn't make you a hero, it makes you tired. It's nothing more than bloody marches. Blistering days, men stacked up against each other in sweaty trenches, stinking, covered in lice.
So the game already has your attention when it starts, and then it squeezes it until your face turns blue. See, as soon as Innocence arrives at the prisoner camp, his nightmare gets worse. Suddenly the horrors of war don't seem quite as horrific.
Hey, you're not bad looking either. Get out. Yeah, you got a real pretty mouth.
Fortunately, you pick a great time to show up. You also pick a great wardrobe. That coat's fantastic. See, Mars War Logs doesn't start slow. It starts dramatic. It starts big, like it needs to. From there, though, that drama falls off a cliff. And you start to see that for all its ambition to be big, this is actually a very small game. The world is small, the scope is small, the characters are small. And worst of all, so's the gameplay. Speaking of which, War Logs is pretty much Mass Effect if Mass Effect wasn't a shooter. I mean, you can shoot things, but it's not really the focus. This game's more like a beat-em-up. And while the combat can be kind of button-mashy in terms of its mechanics, it's actually made interesting thanks to its scavenging system. Just about every weapon you use, you have to craft. You can turn a broken piece of trash into something pretty wicked with just a little scrap metal and leather. You can also upgrade your stuff that way too. So that's a lot of fun, right? Finding stuff, making stuff, and then using it. Again, the problem is what you're doing with them. It's sort of repetitive stuff, and what's worse, the controls suddenly become stiff as soon as you have to fight. So you can target enemies, but strafing it's really awkward and choppy for some reason. And then once in a while, the game just started randomly bringing up menus during combat. Like I was pushing buttons I didn't even push. You know, it's kind of weird. Like, there's a good game here somewhere. And sometimes it's as clear as day, or as clear as the days get on Mars. But all too often, the game's shortcomings just cloud things back up. There are lots of missions, but they're almost always fetch quests. And there's a morality system with dialogue choices, but it's never really as tangible or consequential as the games it's emulating. So even though there's some awesome parts here, especially the crafting and its really sweet leveling system, War Logs never quite manages to craft it together itself. You know, it might not be fair, but it's kind of unavoidable. If you try to do Mass Effect, you're going to be compared to Mass Effect, or any game for that matter. There are a few games on this one's checklist, but try as it might, it's just a smaller scale, a smaller scope, and especially a smaller budget. War Dogs has plenty of strengths, but unfortunately, size isn't one of them.